What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another Godot learning live stream where we're going to be looking at and learning more about Godot, especially in the realm of 2D game development. So we're going to be watching the final tutorial that we're going to run through before we actually start working on our Project Echo, a game we're going to be designing and implementing, trying to create from scratch, starting with a simple prototype and try to move it into a more full-fledged game. But until then, we're going to be working on this tutorial. It's a very interesting tutorial. It's the first 2D game from zero with Godot 4, a vampire survival style. I will share this with you guys in chat for those who are interested in following along. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see how far we can get. We're only going to stream for about an hour, hour and a half before we give a call in a night. So let's go ahead and get this going.
It may come as a surprise, but roguelite shoot-'em-up games like Vampire Survivors or Potato are some of the easiest, most satisfying games to whip up in a single sitting. In this tutorial, you will learn how to do just that. If you're new to the channel, welcome to GDQuest. I'm Nathan, and I've been helping people learn to make games for the past 7 years using Godot. Why Godot? Because of all the game engines we've tried at GDQuest, we found it to be the most intuitive and easiest to pick up. It's lightweight and powerful, but most importantly, it's completely free and open source, so it helps preserve your right to access, understand, and modify the software you will depend on to create your games. In this tutorial, you will learn to code player movement.
I think we're going to stand up for this one.
Enemies that spawn randomly and move towards the player and enemy health, and more. Follow along till the end and you'll have created your first 2D game and become familiar with some of the most essential features of Godot 4, but that's not all. This video is sponsored by all the new and experienced developers who have bought GDQuest courses to learn how to make games with Godot.
Okay.
There are several Easter eggs hidden throughout this video. They are special coupons you can add up to each other for a cumulative discount on our great Godot 4 starter kit. If you find them, I ask that you please keep them to yourself to encourage others to complete this tutorial.
Alright, do you think we can get Easter eggs in this thing?
The starter kit includes 3 complete courses progressively launching in early access starting January 13th.
Yeah, like at this point, like again, I've been saying this for a while. I've been trying to avoid getting stuck in like tutorial hell.
We will start with our foundational courses.
So like, I don't want to be watching too many tutorials, otherwise I won't try to do something on my own, you know?
By our popular interactive cookbook of game mechanics, Node Essentials, Godot 4
Let's hope this will be the last
release
one.
timeline in the description. Throughout early access, you'll be able to get each new module as soon as we release it, rather than wait for the complete word of advice.
Okay.
To follow along and understand what you're reproducing, you should know at least a little bit of coding.
Right.
If you don't,
we know a little bit of coding.
Worries.
We're okay.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel and save this video, then check out GDQuest's free interactive tool, Learn GDScript from Zero. The link's in the description. Without further ado, download the latest version of Godot, then grab a cup of something, get comfortable, and let's get started.
I should grab a cup of something.
After downloading the Godot engine and the files from the website, we'll need to import the project files.
Okay, so we need to get the project files. Boom, boom, boom.
Into the Godot editor. To do that, we first have to extract the project files from the zip you downloaded. So a zip file is a compressed archive that brings multiple files and folders together in a format that's easy to share and fast to download.
Okay, I don't know where the download went. Show in folder. All right. Now we're here. What do we want to do? WinRAR. Extract files here, I guess. Okay. Let me clean up some of this as well. Because we're at the import into the new project that we're going to make, I think, right?
Extract the contents. You can right-click the zip file on most systems and select an option like extract here, extract all on Windows. So that's what I'm going to do. And on macOS, you can double click the zip file and this will create a new folder next to it. This contains all the character images and all we'll need in the project. Then, to open Godot, you don't need to install it. You can just double-click the executable file you downloaded from the website. If you don't have any projects yet, it will offer you to open the asset library to download some examples.
Yeah, I should be using Git, I guess, as well, right? I also wonder how you can kind of hook into like Writer, because the GD scripts that are running are being run through the editor. I wonder if that's the best way to handle it. Maybe I should be looking into information about that potentially, but let's go ahead and just create, edit. Let's work into our project. So boom. So now we have the repository. I guess now I can move my assets into the directory. So here, I think Godot, sample projects, Vampire Survivor. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know if I need to do like, maybe I'll just move them in like that. No, that didn't seem to do anything. Maybe I have to reload the editor, or do I? Maybe I have to go into Godot. Not sure, honestly. Let's reopen up the project. Vampire Survivor style. Edit. Yeah, no. Okay. Let's see what this tutorial says.
Because we don't want to do that, what we want to do is import our project. Click the import button at the top left, and then you need to navigate to the files you extracted. So in my case, it's in Downloads, 2D Project Start, and we want to double click Project.
Okay, never mind. So it's a project, quit to project list, import, nope, desktop. How do I navigate to the desktop here? It's never easy. It's OneDrive, all recognized. No. Can I get that like desktop? Okay, I can. Okay, project, good done. Open, import and edit.
Godot.
There you go.
If Godot recognizes the project, it will give you a green check mark, in which case you can click Import and Edit. This will open the Godot editor where we can get started. Upon importing the project, you will be presented with this empty 3D view. This is what Godot does when your game is still early in development.
Can you do 2D and 3D scenes? I guess you can.
Something for it to
I feel like that shouldn't be a
this
problem.
Will change in a moment, but first let's go around the interface. So in the top left, you have the scene dock, and this is where we will create our character, our slimes, and the other entities in the game. In the bottom left, you can see the files that we included in the project in the file system dock. You can double click any folder you see there to expand it, and you'll see there are a bunch of files for characters, for the pistol of the player, and so on. On the right, you can see a dock named Inspector. This is where you will be able to inspect the different entities that you'll create in
like
the
details
dock.
panel in
Let's
Unreal.
do that and
Checks
get
out.
started with the player character to see how the inspector works. So to get our scene, our
2D
player
scene.
entity started, Godot gives us 3 handy options: 2D, 3D, and user interface.
Yeah, user interface could be interesting to learn in Godot.
Instead,
Not sure
we
how
will
it
click other
relates to like
This
UMG and
brings
stuff
up
in
a
Unreal.
window where you can see all of the nodes, all of the basic building blocks of Godot games that Godot has, and there are loads of them, so you don't really want to search through them manually. Instead, we will use the search bar at the top, so you can click the search bar to highlight it if it isn't already selected, and start typing character. One way to
Character
create
body 2D?
characters in
Oh
Godot
yeah.
is to start with a character body 2D node. So you can press enter or click create with the character body 2D node selected to create your scene. And
Checks
you can see
out.
that Godot switches
Cool.
to the 2D view. I'm going to middle mouse, click and drag to center the view on
Yeah.
the little
Middle mouse
dots
dragging
that we
is
have here that
so awkward
represent
for me.
our
Like I don't
character
know why they
body.
don't do right mouse
And we'll
button
get
drag or
some
anything like that.
visuals
That's weird.
instantly by going
But
to the file
something just to
system
get
dock
used to.
in the bottom left, expand the characters folder, Happy Boo, this is the player character, and you have a file named happyboo.tscn. This is a
Happy
pre-made
Boo.
construct that we've made for you to have the character already animated. So click and drag this tscn file. You can drag it in the view and see your character. I'll use my mouse wheel to scroll in.
Okay, we got
You
Happy
can drag
Boo.
the file directly onto your character body 2D node. And this will create a copy of this template, this scene, as Godot calls it, that we named Happy Boo.
Interesting.
This only gives us visuals. Now, if we want a character that moves and that can interact with the world, we will use the character body 2D node. And this one needs to have a collision shape as a child of it that defines the shape the physics engine will use
Okay.
to prevent
So we have
you
the character
from
body
going
2D,
through
then we have a
walls
collision
and so
shape,
on.
and
To
then
add
outside of
the
that, it's just
collision shape,
visuals, it
we
seems.
select the character body 2D node by clicking on it,
And child
and
node,
then
I
we can
guess, or
click
plus,
the
okay.
plus icon in the top left of the scene dock, or press Ctrl A or
And
Command
collision
A
shape
on Mac
2D, I
on our
assume is what we
keyboard.
want.
This brings up the add node dialog you saw before, and this time we're going to search for collision to find the collision shape 2D node. And
Alright,
then
cool.
press enter to add it. So on the left, you see in the scene dock the collision shape node appeared, and the warning that was next to the character body 2D node.
Yeah, now we gotta
disappeared
supply a
because
shape.
it
I know that
expects
much.
At least one of these.
And I guess that's the
collision
big
shape
question,
nodes.
right? Which kind of shape are we
Now,
wanting to do
if
with
you
this? Is it gonna be a
select the
circle,
collision shape 2D
capsule,
node by clicking it,
rectangle?
in the inspector,
My assumption is
on the right
rectangle,
up
but
here,
you know,
you will see
could
some
be a
information
circle or a
about it.
capsule.
And
Depends
the
on
shape
how
slot is
Kind of
currently
tight
empty.
and matching it wants to
The
be.
shape slot is what will define the collision shape that this collision shape node has. So you can click on empty to see the options that Godot gives you by default. And we can use a circle, a rectangle, a capsule. You know, there are different geometric shapes that the physics engine of Godot can use to detect collisions with walls and other enemies. We'll use a circle shape 2D to start with. So click that, and in the view, you will see a tiny little circle. So I'm going to use my mouse wheel to scroll up to get closer to this, and you will see that this
Wasn't paying attention on what he chose. My bad.
use a
Circle,
circle
okay.
shape 2D to start with. So click that.
Then we
and
got
in
this
the
collision
view,
shape
you
here.
will see a
Easy,
tiny
simple
little
enough.
circle. So I'm going to use my mouse wheel
Mouse.
to scroll up to get closer to this, and you will see that this
One-way
circle
collision margin,
has a
transform.
little dot on the right. You can click and drag on that dot to interactively change the size of the circle. Note that for this to work, you need to have the select tool selected in the toolbar at the top of
I mean,
the
what's he gonna be
viewport.
doing for
There's
position?
another way to change the size of the circle by clicking the circle shape 2D resource in the inspector.
Ah, okay.
And when you do that, it
Custom
expands
solver
and gives you a
bias? What's
radius
that?
property. And on that
I don't know
radius
what that
property,
means.
you can click and drag and see the size of your circle change. So when you click and drag the dot in the view, it changes the radius of the shape in the inspector as well. And that
Okay.
is all we need to get coding.
So he's
But
got
before
about
we
30
can
pixels?
write code on our character, we want to save our progress. To save the character we created as a template that Godot calls a scene, we can press Ctrl S on our keyboard.
Hold up.
That Godot calls a scene, we can press Ctrl S on our keyboard or Command S on Mac.
Okay.
This brings up the file browser that allows us to save files in our project.
Nice.
I'm going to name this one player.tscn. TSCN is the file format Godot uses for scenes, and click the Save button. The character we have created right now will not do anything. The nodes we have allow us to add code to control the character, but without that code, they do
All right,
not
that's as long as I
move
can stand
by
up for,
themselves.
people.
So we need to attach code to our character.
Don't
To
judge
do
me.
this, we're going to select the character body 2D node
All right.
and click this icon in the top right of the scene dock, the attach script icon. We can also right click on the node and select attach script. This brings up a window where we can choose where to save the script, if we want to use some template code that Godot provides, and some more information, like technical information. So first, please make sure to turn off the
Okay, so we're not taking the basic movement from character
otherwise
2D.
it will
Okay.
give us some code that we don't want.
Okay, so
And then
okay,
for the path,
that gives you
can
some
save
boilerplate, I guess.
to res:// so this is the root of your project files, and then player.gd, and click create. This will create an empty script with the line extends character body 2D. This line means
Yeah,
that
extends, I
this
believe,
code that we're
yeah,
going to write
it just
adds code
means
on top
like
of
this.
all the code that Godot
It
has
inherits like
in
public a character and all
body
that stuff,
2D
like in Unreal.
inside of the engine.
Makes sense.
And actually, you can control click on this label, character body 2D.
Yeah, I still think this is really, really cool when you have built-in documentation inside of the
page,
editor.
class reference.
That's super
Godot
cool.
has this built-in technical help that developers can use to see all of the functions and properties that are available on every node. And this can be accessed by control clicking text in the editor, or going to help, search help, which lets you browse all the code features in Godot. I'm going to close the documentation page and we can get coding.
Cool.
The first thing we want to do is to define the physics process function.
Okay.
To write a function, we
So
start
func
with the func keyword.
Underscore
And in this
and
case,
physics
we want to
process
start
delta,
with
right?
an underscore. And
Yeah,
start
we got there.
typing Physics. And you'll see that Godot suggests physics process in parentheses delta. Press enter to confirm and complete this line. And this function is known as physics update or something like that in other engines.
So this is
When you
basically
find it
tick,
pretty
right?
much every game
Almost.
engine. And this is the function that the engine will hook onto and call each time it needs to calculate a physics update. Because games update physics and update the general game state many times per second to produce individual images. And so we use these update functions to run our code many times per second, which allows us to move characters, for example. We'll start
Makes sense,
by
makes sense.
calculating the desired movement direction of the player. For
And
that,
we're gonna be
we'll
using
use
input,
a
right?
feature from Godot. So first, let's create a variable that will
Var
name
direction.
and we'll use that to store the movement direction. We write the equal sign to assign to it, and then input with a capital I dot get vector. Okay, so input is an object, an
Then we got
entity
move
that
left
Godot
and move
provides
right
that you have
and move
access
up.
in all your script to call some built-in functions that help you check for player input. And getVector is very handy because it calculates a direction vector as a 2D vector value. So it takes 4 arguments that are
Okay.
input names, input map actions, as Godot calls them. These are labels that we give to our input. And we made
So it takes 4
in this
arguments,
project,
huh?
so we're going to use them right now and then see how you can create and edit your own. So start by writing quotes, and then Godot will give you a list of the
Does it matter which order
input
that you put these
labels
in?
registered in your project. So we created the top 4, move down, left, right, and up, which we'll use, and some for the user interface come by default and are used by the Godot editor. Anyway, this function asks us first which input action corresponds to the left direction. So this is move left, then we write a comma, and we're going to then give the right action, and you can see that
Let me look at
I'm
this
not
vector.
inventing them.
So vector, so negative x, positive x, negative y, positive y. Interesting.
These are told to me by Godot as I
And
write
then
the function argument. So I'm going to put
This is
another
move
comma,
down and move
and then
up.
for the third input action, I want the up direction,
You want the up.
which Godot calls -y, and finally the down action, which Godot calls +y.
Okay.
So this will give us a vector that we can use to move our
That's an
character.
interesting way of
And,
handling it.
we can check that. Pretty
Haven't seen that
quickly.
done before.
So the character body 2D that we are working with has a property, a variable called
Position?
velocity that is built
Velocity.
in,
Okay.
and this allows us to give the character
So do I have
both
to do like
a
velocity
speed and
equals
a direction in the form of
direction
one 2D vector. So we write velocity.
times, I don't know,
You can
delta
see that this turns
times like
slightly
10
blue
or
because
something.
this is one of the properties of our character 2D. And we write equals, and then we can say direction times whatever value you want. So you could say 600, something like that. So this would mean
Okay, so
move
600.
in the input direction at 600 pixels per second in this case. Okay, so we give the character a velocity, and then we need to call a function for Godot to move it.
Oh,
And this one is also built into the character body 2D and is called move and slide. You can just call it, and if we run the scene
Silly
by
me.
clicking this icon in the top right or pressing F6 on our keyboard, you're going to see, well, the character is in the top left, but if you press the WASD keys, you're going to be able to move the character already with just 3 lines of code. So this is the basic way of moving a character body. And note that this will automatically take walls and other collisions we will add to our game
okay.
into account. Let's see where these labels, the input.
But I feel like forgot how to do the delta. So direct delta times speed, well, whatever speed we want to do, times delta. I thought that would do what I wanted to do, but it's moving really slow. How do I forget how to use delta? I'm so dumb sometimes. So direction, delta, or is it divided by delta? I feel like now I'm gonna go really, yeah, I'm gonna go really fast. Maybe he'll just go over it. No need to fret about it at the moment.
Actions come from in the project. To do so, we go to Project, Project Settings, so you can click that, and then you'll land on the General tab, but you want to go to the second tab, Input Map. And here you can see move left, move right, move up, move down. So we just define them for you. Let's see how you can define your own. Let's say that you
So
want
yeah, defining inputs
different
pretty
action
straightforward
name
though.
jump because your game has a jump, or perhaps like shoot because you have a gun. You type the action name in this bar right above the panel, and then you click add or you press enter, and you'll see a new entry gets added. By default, it doesn't have any keys on the keyboard or gamepad buttons.
Guessing
or
he's gonna do
anything
left
like
mouse
that.
button?
So we need to register those. To do so, we go to the plus button on the right of our label and click it, and this gives us
Let's
a menu
do,
where we can
right
search
trigger.
for the kinds of inputs we want. So let's say we want the left mouse button to shoot, so we can expand mouse button and
Okay,
select
so
left
I was
mouse
correct in my
button
assumptions here.
and click OK. And you'll see
I also want to add gamepad
shoot is now
support.
associated with the left mouse click.
Very convenient.
And we
And I'm
can
glad
do
Unreal
more than
does this
that.
too.
Actually, the beauty
You
of
can
the
just
system is
use
that
the
we can
thumbstick.
associate multiple inputs with one label, which
Because now I
makes
should
our
be
code
able to move
very
with
easy
the
to
left
work with.
thumbstick, which
So I'm gonna click the plus
I
button
don't know.
again,
You can see. Yeah,
and
I
now
can.
I'm going to say we can shoot
So that's
with
clutch.
the space bar. So I'm just going to press the space bar on my keyboard, and Godot recognizes it, and then I click OK, and this adds the spacebar on the keyboard. I'm going to press plus again, and let's say I have a gamepad and I
Okay,
want
cool. He's doing gamepad as well.
the RB button. So maybe I'm going to click the filter input in there and say RB, which is the right bumper on the Xbox controller. And you can see that Godot suggests it after searching for it. And so I'm going to click OK there. And now I have 3 different inputs that can trigger the shoot action: clicking the left mouse, pressing the space bar, and the right bumper on
Oh, he's doing
Xbox
right bumper on the gamepad. I'm gonna stick with trigger. Trigger feels good for shooting.
PlayStation or Switch controller. All right, so this gives you an example of how you can add new input actions. You can also add new inputs to existing actions using their plus button right there. And well, I'm just going to delete this shoot action because we will not use it in our game.
Oh.
And close the input map.
I'm gonna leave it. Whatever.
Our character can move, but it would be much nicer if it played animations. So if we go to the scene dock, you'll see that there's a camera slate icon next to Happy Boo. And this tells you that this entity is an instance of a template that Godot calls a scene. So it's a scene instance. And you can click the camera slate to open the source scene in the editor. So let's click it, and it will open Happy Boo. And we can go to the 2D
Happy
screen
Boo, Happy
at
Boo.
the top of the interface and use the middle mouse click and mouse wheel to zoom on the character.
So it's ground shadow. That's what that is. Okay.
Top left,
The white thing is ground shadow.
Many of those nodes.
So animation player is what we gotta work with, I'm assuming.
And most of these are sprite nodes. The one
And,
with the
yeah,
happy
we have
face
animation
there. It means
thing
they
here.
are individual images that we can move and display on the screen. So this is how we make.
Is it because it's locked?
A character typically in games with a bunch of sprite nodes, and this scene has something
Doesn't really
called
play
an
anything.
animation player. And if you click the animation player, a new interface pops up at the bottom of the screen. It's an interface that allows you to design animations. So
he animates within there. Okay, so
another
that's what
video.
the ROM was.
In this project, we have prepared the
That looks weird.
animations for you. And so if you click the drop-down menu at the top of the animation editor, you'll get
kinda
a
creepy.
list of the character animations. And one we prepared for you is called Walk. And in the bottom right of the editor, you can click the bar next to the zoom icon to control the zoom level of the animation timeline. And you can use the playback controls in the top left of the editor to play the animation. So if I click play on the walk animation, you'll see my character
It's like
walks.
doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop.
And so we can access this animation player with code to play animations. And we've done that for you in the script that we attached to the Happy Boo character.
So we got here, play idle animation, play walk animation, okay.
2 functions for you there.
So do we have to do it like on construct to play the idle animation, and then we
walk
play
animation.
walk animation
We
like
can
here?
call these from our player script. So I'm going to close
No, I have to say
the
what?
Happy Boo scene by clicking the X arrow next to it. Going
Where's
to
the
call
dollar sign?
animation editor at the bottom of the screen, and I'm also going to right click on the happyboo.gd script and close it for now.
Is that valid?
Okay, so we are back to the player.
Yeah, more or less.
script. From there, we need to do a couple of things. First, we're going to try playing an animation on the Happy Boo character.
So typically what you would want to do is create this, right?
Is attached to our player node, to our character body 2D node. And we want to call functions on this other Happy Boo node that represents the character visuals. To do that in Godot, we first need to get a reference to access the Happy Boo node from our script. So I'm going to click the player.gd script again. And the function that we use to get another node is called get_node. And from there, we can get one called Happy Boo.
Okay.
We can get the nodes by name or by
I definitely think this is the better way of doing this, just from other tutorials I watched. It makes it kind of more clear and verbose what this is. And you can reference it
so we can call its
anywhere.
function.
And you only have to get the node once.
Play
I wonder if he'll touch on that at all.
underscore animation. And this is a function that we defined in the script of Happy Boo, which is why we can call it on the Happy Boo node. If we press F6 or click this button in the top right to run the current scene, now as we move, you'll see the character is playing the walk animation. And it constantly plays it, which is not necessarily what we want, right? We want to play walk only when the character is walking.
So we just say like if
use a condition.
velocity
So
is whatever.
above the line when I play the walk animation, I'm going to use the if keyword to define a condition, and then we need to write an expression that will
Is that a
be
valid
either
expression?
true or false. And what we can do is only play the walk animation if the velocity vector is long enough. This will
So
be an
do I have to say
indication
like that
the
length?
player is walking. So we can write velocity dot, and then we can call the length function
Something
on
like this?
that vector value on that velocity, and this will give us the length of the vector
Checks out.
as a decimal number.
Easy enough.
So
You can move
write
into that.
if velocity.length is greater than 0, we need to add a colon at the end of the line, and then we need to indent the following line to be part of this block.
So you
of
can draw
code. So,
shapes.
in GDScript, it works a bit as in Python. The spacing that you have at the start of lines
F8, I think,
is
yeah.
meaningful. And so to put lines inside of a condition or inside of a function, you need to give the lines after the if, for example, an extra tab character at the start. And this is how the language knows how to group code together. So the condition says if the velocity vector has a length greater than 0, we play the walk animation, right? And
simple
this works
enough.
because our velocity multiplies the direction, the input direction, by a number. Now, if we don't press any keys, the direction vector will have a length of 0, and 0 multiplied by 600 is going to give us a vector of length 0. This is not enough, though, because if we play the game, if we start moving, the character keeps playing the animation. It doesn't revert back to not animating. So what we can do is go back one indentation level to the same level as the if, and write else. You know, if this condition
Yeah,
is
like if
fulfilled,
I definitely feel
write
like I've been
walk
watching too many
animation.
tutorials, because at this point this is kind of
Else, we can
getting
play
redundant.
the
So
idle
this is definitely gonna be the last
to
tutorial,
do
because
that easily, we can
at this
click
point I got
on the
either take a
line where
shit
we play the
or
walk
get off the
animation,
toilet when it comes to
press
starting this
Control
game,
C
you know?
to copy the line, then click the line after else and press Control V to duplicate the line we copied. And we can select the word that says walk and change it to idle. Now, if we press F6 and I move the character, it's going to animate walking, and if I stop, it's going to play the idle animation.
That's what we have. We're good.
Before we move on to creating the game scene, I want to talk about getting nodes because it's something central to Godot.
Okay, so I'm assuming he's gonna do and go over what I have here when you have the var on ready. It's like a construction variable that uses this from the scene panel here, I hope.
When we use the getNode function, we pass not just the name of the node we want, but the path to the node. Let me show you what happens if I change the hierarchy of nodes in my game. If I press F6 to run the scene, now I get an error. And the error tells us basically that the getNode...
I mean, is there a way to check if something is valid? Like, happy boo dot valid is... Can I say, like, if happy boo, for example? If happy boo? Pass? I don't know. Is that still good? Okay.
didn't find the node that we were looking for. So now, because Happy Boo is a child of the collision shape 2D, we can't just write Happy Boo, we have to write collision shape 2D / Happy Boo. So we give the name of a node, / to look at its children, and then the name of the child node, and we can make this path as short or as long as we want, right? This means that each time you reparent the node, you have to change these paths in your code. And we're gonna see a feature that works around that and makes our lives easier. But first, notice one more thing, it's that if I change the code in both instances and press F6, the character still works fine, just as expected. And this tells you that the hierarchy of nodes and how you organize them is going to...
And I believe this is also safer. Kind of like what he's saying here. If I were to do something like this, it should still compile. Oh, it doesn't. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I thought that was a safeguard. What's the point?
That makes sense to your game. So you'll need to experiment with that. Of course, in this example, it's probably more natural to have Happy Boo next to the collision shape because they don't need to have a parent-child relationship. But you can parent nodes however you'd like and however works best for your game. Okay, so now I need to revert the path here in getNode to just Happy Boo because now it's not a child of the collision shape.
Well, I hope he goes over like a method in which to do this safely.
If I select some text, I can press Ctrl D to select other copies of the same text in my script. So now I have two selections and I can just edit my text and see it edits both instances simultaneously. So I'm back to the code we had at first. So there are two more things I want to show you here. There's a shortcut to the getNode function.
I'm assuming the shortcut is what he's going to talk about. Because if I do it this way and then I go like this, Control click it, or is it like... Yeah, that's how you write it. Okay. Well, let's fix the hierarchy there. Make sure we're still good. We are. Great. F8.
Function that people in the Godot community use a lot. It's the $. So I'm going
to the $, this thing
called getNode Happy Boo and press Ctrl D, and I'm going to replace that with $Happy Boo without quotes. And this is the shortcut. When you do that, it's like calling the getNode function, so our code
MC $, baby.
Okay, great. But because it's a shortcut to calling getNode, if I reparent my Happy Boo again, I play the game.
I hope he tells us a safeguard on how to make sure you can just declare this variable no matter where it is in the hierarchy. I don't know. Does that even exist?
And I get the same error as before. So I mentioned that there was a feature we could use to work around that. It's called marking nodes as unique name in the scene.
Oh, okay.
You can right-click any node and click access as unique name. And when you do that, Godot will automatically find the node and keep it stored in memory for fast access for you.
So now does that work?
When you do that, a person sign appears next to the node. And
so what do I have to do differently with this variable?
In our code, use that person sign instead of the $. So I'm going to select the first $, press Ctrl D to select the other one, and type person sign on my keyboard. When I do that, you can see that I'm not...
That's clutch. Okay, so that's what I want to do.
The node, just the name.
Use modulus percentage sign.
Play the game. Everything
on certain things, you know.
Better, even, if I change the hierarchy of nodes, I can press F6 and everything.
Hope you like the ASMR of me cracking my knuckles into the camera.
So this is a great feature
into the microphone, I should say.
All the nodes you need to access in your script. It also has a performance benefit for you because Godot will get the node only once at the start of the game for you, and when you call the getNode function instead many times, Godot has to do the calculations to find the node each time. With this feature, it does not. Now, the limitation of this feature is that it only works within that scene, within you know, the
so like if this character was to be put into a different scene, then it would have to work differently. I guess you'd have to make a unique name within that scene.
We will not be able to access this Happy Boo node from other places in our code base. Next up, we will create the main game scene.
Okay, cool.
To start with, I want to rename the character body 2D node because when we add the player to the main game,
Do we want to
this
just
is
call
the
it player?
name that will display. You can double click on the name of the node and select the text and write whatever you want in there to rename, and then press enter to confirm. I'll save with Control S, Command S on Mac, and we can get creating our main scene. Go to Scene, New Scene to create an empty tab in the editor, and then we'll click on 2D Scene to create a new Node 2D at the root of our game.
Sick.
There again, I'm going to click the name and change
This is
it
gonna be like a
to
level or
game.
something? Okay,
Will be
game.
a bit more explicit, and press Control S, Command S to save the scene. So we could call it a survivors game, for example, because this is the kind of game we're making. Press enter. The next thing we want to do is head back to the 2D view. To do that, I'm going to click 2D at the top of the editor, and we can add our player in there. So I'm going to fold the characters directory in the file system doc and click and drag player.tscn to the center of the rectangular area in the editor. This area represents our game window, or the screen, the
Okay,
area
simple
that will
enough.
be displayed in the game. The background is currently gray and very ugly. We want to
That's
change
not
that,
ugly.
and to do so, we're going to add a new node. So with the game node selected, press Ctrl A or Command A to bring the Add Node dialog, and start typing color rect. This is a user interface node that Godot provides that displays a rectangular area with the desired color. Click Create to add it, and you'll see a small rectangle in the top left. If you have the select mode active, you'll see these dots, and you can click them
So I guess
to
we can
resize
just.
the node.
Oh,
And if you pull on
that's
the
bright.
bottom right,
Sorry.
dot, you will be able to resize to cover the entire game area. Now the problem is it displays in front of the player, so we can click and drag.
I mean, what
to
color is he
reorder
expecting us
the
to
node
make this
in the
thing?
scene dock,
It was
and place
gray
it
before.
above the player so that it draws behind, because the drawing order by default is from top to bottom, right? So color rect is going to draw
I mean,
first,
that's
and
good
then the
enough,
player
right?
draws
Nice little
after it, so
purpley.
it draws on top.
It's nice on the
of
eyes,
our
I'd say.
rectangle. Let's add trees to the scene.
All right,
which
give
will
me a
us
second,
two
guys. I'll be
things.
right back.
Nice.
I'm gonna just check on something. All right, sorry about that, guys. Every time I'm streaming by myself in the house, I get paranoid. I hear stuff. I just gotta check things out. Everything's okay. Front door is locked. We're fine.
Nicer visuals, and also a way to test the collisions of the player. In the file system doc, in the bottom left, you'll find a trees directory with a pine tree image. You could absolutely click and drag that image onto the game area to place pine trees. The thing is, this creates sprite 2D nodes, and these only give us visuals. They don't give us any collision information for the physics engine.
Sneaky little
So
guy.
instead, we
You
will
could just
create
hide.
a new scene that uses this image and has collisions. So we go to scene, new scene to create the scene. And we're going to start with another node. This time we are looking
Animated
for
body?
static
No,
body
static
2D.
body. Yeah. Checks out.
As the name suggests, it's a way to describe a static thing in the game that is going to have collisions and block player characters.
I think a rectangle shape is going to be fine.
Like the character body node, this needs a collision shape to function. So
Let's just see if he goes with that
Control
as
A
well.
and look for collision shape 2D. And like before, we need to give a specific shape to this node. So in the inspector on the right, we click the empty slot and select a circle.
He's good
shape.
to circle, okay.
On top of that, I'm going to reselect the static body 2D and click and drag my pine tree onto the scene. And we can zoom in a bit to see it more closely and try to center the base of the tree on the crossing axes in the editor.
I mean, is there a way to
These
ensure that
axes
there is
represent
offset, right?
the position that the tree will have when we drag and drop it into the game.
We don't really
So
want
this
it to
will
have
allow
an
us to
offset, right?
Place the base of the trees
Okay, so
basically
the base of
inside
the
our
tree.
scene easily. You'll notice that the collision shape appears behind the tree, so we can change the order to see it in front of the tree.
I mean,
and
is circle
then
going to be
click
like the
and
best
drag on
option?
the dot to make the collision match the base of the tree. This means that the player will only collide with this circular area because we want the player to pass behind the top of the tree, right? The collision should only be around the base,
Ah,
which is
that makes
really
sense.
what is going to be blocking you. On top of that, we're going to add a nice little shadow to the tree, which will allow us to see another trick. First, change the color of a sprite. So in the file system doc, we have a shadow sprite, but instead of opening the folders individually, one thing you can do to find a
File system is
to
basically the
click
content browser, I
Filter
guess.
Files field and look for a certain name. In this case, if we look for shadow, we will find the ground shadow sprite. You can click and drag it onto the game scene and it appears in front of the tree. So I'm going to click and drag ground shadow behind the pine tree. One thing we can do that's pretty cool with the handles that you can see here is we can scale down an image just like we did to upscale our color
Probably
rectangle.
going to be just
So
under
you can
the...
click and drag on one of the dots to scale
Ah.
down the shadow. Now, the thing is, if you do that, it's going to push the size towards the opposite corner. So
And I guess I could change the
instead,
color?
You can press the Alt key and the Shift key down together while clicking
Offset
and dragging,
animation
and this
region.
will scale the shadow uniformly,
Process.
and you can make it so it
I mean, can you make a shadow? I mean, not a shadow. Can you change the color
has
of a
an
sprite
appropriate
explicitly?
size for the tree. The shadow is white, so it doesn't really look like a shadow.
Okay,
right
he's
now.
good to talk about
And
it. Cool.
actually, making sprites white allow us to recolor them directly in Godot. So this is why we made the shadow white. If you select the ground shadow node by clicking it in the view or by clicking it in the scene doc, in the inspector on the right, you can see it has a bunch of properties of
Okay,
settings that
under
you can
texture
change,
or material?
many of which are behind folded sections. We want
New
to
canvas
expand
item material?
visibility.
Oh, visibility.
First, you will see a slot named modulate
Modulate,
that has
okay.
a color next to it. This is a feature that allows us to tint the color of the shadow. And if it's white by default, the modulate property will effectively replace the color
Or
of
we can
the
make
shadow.
it like kind of
So
dark
click
green.
on the white color to bring up a color picker. And then on the
Something like
right,
that
you
makes
can
sense.
click
That
and
kind of
drag
looks like a
on the
shadow, right?
vertical band to change the brightness of the color,
Yeah,
making
okay.
it darker and darker. So we want to make it slightly darker, and then in the circle in the middle, you can move the
What's he going
slot.
for?
You can click and drag
Slightly
to select
green?
a different hue for your shadow. So it could be slightly blue, for example. Click in the viewport to deselect the color picker, and you can see that now the shadow is slightly blue, and this will contrast well with the white background in our main game scene.
I don't want to make my
Let's say
background white in
our
the main
scene,
game scene. That's gonna
after
hurt your
renaming
freaking
the
eyes.
node, we're going to rename it to tree, or it could be pine tree because it's pine tree precisely. And we can press Ctrl S to save the scene into pinetree.tscn. If we go back to the survivors game,
So now we can just nuke these
I'm going
things.
to clear the file filter in the file system doc and fold everything. And now I can click
just
and drag my
these
pine
in.
tree onto the game area. So I'm going to click and drag a couple. I can even group them in clumps. I'm going to have a bunch, draw them however
That's
you'd
pretty
like.
cool.
And now, if I
always forget about these like small
F6
little
or
tricks you can
click
do and like
the camera
do
slate
things.
icon in the top right.
Okay, so it
I
lets me
can
pass
run
through
my
on the way
cutscene
up,
and
right?
move the character. And if I move
Oh no, my
against
character's
the
collision.
trees,
Yeah, I
you'll
get
see
it.
that
Yeah.
the character can get blocked or kind of slide against the base of the tree.
Yeah, I don't know why the
And this
collision we're
is
just
what
doing on the
the
bottom
move
of the
and
character
slide
though.
function of the player script does for us.
That's nice.
It
The
handles
movement.
collisions automatically for us. Now you'll notice one problem. It's that sometimes I can go behind the trees, and that's
But yeah,
great.
move and
That's
slide
what we
doesn't really
want,
work
right?
in this
When I'm
case here when
behind
I'm
the
moving
base
through
of the
that.
tree. But when I move down, the character is still drawing behind the pine tree. So we could move all the pine trees up the hierarchy in the scene doc so that they draw behind the character, but then they would always be behind the characters. And what would be ideal is that if I am in front of a tree, I draw in front, and if I go up, I draw behind the tree. The
That'd be
player,
cool.
that is.
So how do
And
we
Godot
do
can
that?
do that for us. We can select the game node here.
Ordering?
And expand the ordering
Awesome.
category in the inspector, and you will see a checkbox next to Y sort enabled. Note that if you hover any of these properties, you will get a
If true,
technical
child nodes with the lowest
description
Y
of
position are
how they
drawn
work,
before those with a
right?
higher Y
It's
position.
more of a
If fall.
description for
That's interesting.
experienced developers, but it explains how the feature works. So if we select the game node and turn Y sort enabled on it, now if
That's
I move the
interesting.
character around the view, even in the editor, you can see a preview of the effect. So if the player is below the tree, it draws in front, and if I go above a tree, the player
That's pretty
will
cool. That's
draw
pretty neat,
behind.
I think.
And any character or mob that we will add to the scene will do that. If I zoom in, notice how this works. You can see
So it's
the
based on
cross that
collision?
represents the position of
Oh,
the
that
player.
okay. The
And
position.
you
yeah.
remember how I told you we wanted the crossing axes to be at the base of the tree? Well, this is because this determines the position of the tree in the game level, and this is what the Y sorting feature will use as a reference for the drawing order. So notice, if I move the player up right above the base of the tree, instantly the character draws behind. And if I go below the base of the tree, the player draws in front. Now, the good thing is that we have collision shapes, right, for the player and the tree. So what will happen is that the player will not be able to go, just above the tree like this, because they can't overlap due to the collision. So the player will slide around the tree and move around the tree's collision circle, right? We can press F6 to test that, and you can see that it looks a little more natural when playing the game, thanks to the collision
Yeah,
shapes.
that definitely is pretty cool. I like
Okay,
that.
one last thing I want us to do at this stage is to set this as our project's main game scene. And we can do that by clicking the play icon in the top right of the editor, or pressing the shortcut F5. This will bring a pop-up
Oops.
that offers us to set the current scene that's highlighted in the editor as the main scene, and it will play our scene just like when pressing F6. Now, the reason we do that is that we often want to go work on a different scene. For example, I want to change the collision shape of my tree, so I'm going to make it way bigger. And I want to be able to test how it plays in the game. So
Are we
now
really
I
got
can
to change the
press
collision for
F5
that so big?
to play the main game scene and test that. And now you can see that the player cannot move as close to the trees anymore.
Do we want that though?
Okay, I'm going to press Ctrl-Z to undo this
Okay.
and head back to the main game scene. If you want to change the main scene of your game, if you set another one by mistake, like the player or something, anytime you can go to Project, Project Settings, and then click on Run, and this is where the main scene is selected. So anytime you could change the paths there, or you could click the folder icon and go select another main scene, click Open, and this will change the path for your project. Next up, we'll work on mobs that chase the player. So let's go to Scene, New Scene to create a new scene for them. And we're gonna create a character body 2D node. So
yeah, we'll finish. I think we'll go through this section about creating the mobs, and then I think we'll call it a day with the stream, honestly.
Click on Other Node, and in the Add Node window,
character body, baby.
Character body 2D. This is perfect to move the mob around and to make them collide with the trees as well.
Like low-key, I don't know, I'm changing the subject a little bit. I'm low-key excited. I bought an Xbox 360 on Polish version of Amazon with a bunch of games.
Okay, so we can...
I have a buddy who's into retro gaming now. He's playing like N64 and all that stuff. So kind of want to get back into the Xbox era of stuff. Xbox 360 had like the best games.
We'll add the slime we prepared for you as a child of that. So expand the characters directory, and there you want to expand slime, and you'll find slime.tscn. You can drag and drop it onto the mob node. And like before, this is a scene that has a bunch of sprites, as you can see if I zoom in, and an animation player that's going to have animations for when the slime is hurt, when the slime is walking, and so on. And we expose them as functions play, walk, play, hurt in the script attached to the slime.
Oh, he's jiggly.
So I'm going to close this and head back to the 2D view, call the animation editor, and there we need to add one more thing. What is that? Well, it's the collision shape as usual.
Definitely cool. You can make animations like that pretty quickly, but yeah, I'm not much of an animator myself, but you know.
Press Control A, Command A on Mac, and search for collision shape 2D. And once more, we go to the inspector,
we're doing a
click
circle?
the empty slot, and create a circle shape for the slime.
Nice.
This will be what the slime uses to collide, but also.
So which way is one-way collision?
Upon touching.
So that's why this collision shape should only detect collision on one side, top or
to
bottom.
Place the circle so that it encompasses the slime as best as possible. This will also be used as the collision shape for touching the slime with the player's bullets. That's our scene done, so we can save it as mob.tscn, will be fine. And we're going to add a script to move the mob. So select the mob node and click the Attach New Script button. Once again, we don't want a template, so make sure that the checkbox is turned off.
Keeps the template option as you chose before.
Mob.gd. Click Create to create the script, and we can get code.
Are we going to be doing the physics thing again?
Close the other tabs in here. And so we're going to have code that's a bit different from the players.
Okay.
Because the mob is an artificial intelligence, it's not going to listen to player input. Instead, we're going to make calculations to move it towards the player. So first,
we need to get reference to the player, I guess?
To store a reference to the player,
to
find the position of the player and follow them. For that, at the top of the script, we create a new member variable, a property of our script that we'll call player. First, now we can leave it empty and get coding. Assume that in this variable,
how do we instantiate player though?
The player node, the character body 2D node of our player. So I'll head back to the script editor. You can click on script or press Control F3 to do that, right? And we will define, once again, the physics process function.
Control F3.
Because there are collisions involved when the mob and the player move, so we need to use the physics process function to synchronize their motion with the physics engine. So type func underscore physics process, enter to complete. And then inside of the function, we will calculate the desired movement direction of the mob. And this is the direction from this mob to the player. So we can type a new variable that will name direction. And this one will use the position of the mob. And we will type global position. This is where this mob is in the game world. So this is a property
Why is
that
the local
comes with
transform
many nodes,
here?
including
Blah, blah, blah.
sprites or character body 2D that we have access to in our scripts. Dot. First, this position is a 2D vector coordinate. So it comes with a bunch of vector specific functions. So we can write dot direction to.
Okay.
It's a function that will calculate
The
the
player dot
to a
direction.
point, and that point will be the position of the player. So we can type player dot global position. And so this will give us the direction each physics frame to the player.
But the player's still
velocity
invalid
of
at this
our
point.
mob will be equal to direction times some value. So something smaller than the speed of the player is good here. So 300 is half as fast. So mobs don't crawl onto the player too fast.
You don't want them to be too OP, I
Once
guess.
again, we can call
Move and slide.
So you can see how to move an AI or the player, the code.
But I mean,
is
how
pretty
are we instantiating
similar.
what the player is?
Now
It's
our
player.
code is not done because currently
Okay.
the player variable is empty. We need to get a reference to the player. There are a couple of ways we can do that. There's the more hard-coded way and the more flexible way.
Let's do the
We'll
more
start with
flexible way.
Simple hard-coded way.
Never
For
mind.
that, we need to save the file, move back to the survivors game scene, and I'm going to move to the 2D screen and add one of our mobs. So I'll fold the characters directory and click and drag mob.tscn onto the game board. Right, and so let's see what happens first if we play with F5. Of course, we get an error because
player is null,
stored
right?
in the player variable. So player.global
2D, so here's our
position,
dude.
like, this is a global position of nothing.
Where's
It's
our
not
mob?
valid code. Now, if I play the game again, I'm going to stop here with the error. And if you look in the top left, you will see our scene doc changed a bit. We have one tab called local and
Yes,
another
and it
one called
crashed the same.
remote. If you click remote,
Okay, how do you get that?
player.global position, like this is a global position of nothing. It's not valid code. Now, if I play the game again, I'm going to stop here with the error. And if you look in the top left, you will see our scene doc changed a bit.
Okay,
We have
remote and
one
local.
tab called local and another one called remote. If you click remote, you will be able to see not the nodes of the scene you're editing in the editor, but instead the nodes of your running Godot game.
Okay, so this is like runtime.
There you can expand the hierarchy and see exactly the node structure of your entire game, because when you put all these scenes together at runtime, Godot just creates
Yeah, it has
all the
members, player,
corresponding
null
nodes
up here,
from
so that
the
makes sense.
templates that you provided.
But again, yeah, what
And it
like
adds a
I
special
don't want
route
to. I
at
don't
the
want to do
top
like a hard-coded
called
reference.
route. And so using this route, we can reliably find the path to the player node. It's route/game/player.
I mean, it can be assumed that the player's
So,
always going to be
We can
present,
get
but that
node
could also be a
in
bad assumption,
our
like
player
especially in cases of like
variable, right? So we
UI and
can
stuff.
say
Do you
get
really want to
node,
have a player available just
and
yet?
we can type. So the way you write for the root, you start with a /, then you type root/game/.
I'm not even going to bother doing this hard-coded way. I
let's
want to
try
do the other
play
way.
again after doing that. And we get an error. And this one is a bit longer. Basically, it tells you to use the @onReady annotation, blah, blah, blah. So this error tells you you're trying to get this node, but this is too early in the state of the running game. And this gets me to how getting nodes and how Godot creates these nodes in your game. So Godot, when you launch the game, is going to immediately run this code before even having added all the nodes to the game. The code that is outside of functions gets run very early when the game starts. So normally what we want to do is to wait for the engine to have created all the nodes in the game. And the way we do that is by using another special function from Godot called
ready.
ready. Ready guarantees that a given node and all its children have been created.
All right, so
Inside of the ready function, we could write player is equal to, and then have our code to get the node. And there again, if we try to play, you can see that the slime can follow the player without errors. So
that's pretty cool.
We can get our node like this. Now, there's a shorthand that's very commonly used by Godot users. Instead of writing the ready function for variables like these, we can use what's called an annotation. So I'm going to reset the code to what we had before. And in front of the var keyword, we're going to type @onReady. And this @onReady is equivalent to doing the ready function and the line we had before, right? OnReady makes the line of code execute
that works pretty well
around the top of the ready function. And it's a shorthand that you will find often in Godot because we at least used in Godot to use many of those kinds of lines of code, and having onReady prevented us from having to write 2 lines of code to set the variables at the start of the game.
Oops.
So we can do that. OnReady player is equal get node root game/player. And this works, but this works not only for one mob. If I go back to the 2D view and I duplicate the mob, to do that we can press Ctrl D and click and drag on the mob as many times as we want. Notice that if I play, all the mobs follow the player and they collide with one another.
That's always scary, right?
Trees. Great. So the good thing about that is that the code that we wrote runs individually on each of the individual mobs. And this is the power of game scripts. All the code that you write implicitly runs on the node to which you attach the script. As I said, this way of writing the code is more of the hard-coded way. It works as long as the player node is a child of the game node. But if I reparent it to the color rect and press F5, of course, I get errors. And actually, so when I play the game and I get these errors, something called the debugger appears. It's a tool you can use to inspect the state of your game, the variables and all. So if you're just...
I also wonder what kind of debug draws exist in Godot. Like in Unreal, you can do line trace debugging, drawing spheres and stuff like that.
Getting started, it's going to be a bit overwhelming, but what's important is that you can find a detailed log of all the code errors that occurred in the errors tab in there. And if you look, you can see that it tells you onReady. So this corresponds to our use of onReady here. Node not found. So it didn't find the player node at the path we provided, root/game/player. And this is because the player is now a child of color rect. And of course, if we move the player back in the hierarchy, we will not get the error again. First, how would you avoid this hard-coded option?
Yes.
Well, typically would
Thank
leave
you.
the player variable empty like this. And when creating the mobs from some other scripts, you would use code to create them, which we'll do later. You would set the player variable of the mob, and we will see how a little later in the project.
Okay.
But for now, nothing prevents us from leaving this line as a default. First, we will not move the player, but also, even if we did, we can use this code as a good default, and then from our game script or some other place, we will make sure that the player variable is properly set. And with that, you have mobs that move after the player. Next up, how about we make the view follow the character?
Okay, so I think that's going to be a good point to finish the tutorial for today. We're about an hour in, about almost a bit halfway. So that's where I'm going to end for today. I think we're going to continue this probably tomorrow. Probably finish the second half of the tutorial and maybe start working more on the design things and start really fleshing out our project and our prototype and everything like that. So that's going to be cool. So that's where I'm going to end it thank you so much, anybody who is watching. If there is anybody watching and you aren't following me here on Twitch, a follow would be much appreciated. So again, we'll come back tomorrow, most likely, continue this tutorial, finish it up, and then we'll get kind of started with our full-on project. So I'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.